Hey, this is Ron Coddington from Military Images Magazine, and I want to welcome you to Season 1, Episode 4 of Research Rabbit Hole. This is our new program that examines Civil War photography and puts it in context to the nation, to the world, to the culture before the Civil War and after the Civil War. We look at a number of different topics, but they're always rooted in Civil War photography. And tonight's episode, as I previewed earlier, for those of you who are watching on Facebook, is geared towards you, all of you who enjoy tintypes, ambrotypes, and daguerreotypes, the hard plate images. And tonight's episode will give you a little bit of a flavor about what you're going to hear. It's called the backwards image problem. So I'm going to share my screen with you and we will get started. So here we go. All righty. Now, I want to start with this image, one of my favorites. I scanned this image a few years ago when it was in the collection of Rich Jan, and I love it. And I just have to geek out for a moment. Here it is. It's a wonderful tintype. It's beautifully tinted. This soldier, this red bearded soldier, appears to be ready to jump off the page. You can see his hand on his musket is pointing just a little bit forward, and he's ready to go off into campaign. A classic, dare I say, quintessential image of a Union soldier. You can see his face close up with the red tinted beard, the blue tinted eyes. His cap is showing his company letter, the D, and what appears to be a 3, a 6, followed by a 7, which tells us which regiment he is in. So company D of the 37th, 67th, or 87th regiment of an unknown state. He's unidentified, so we don't know who he is. Now, this cap, as those of you who are in the know on hard plate images, there was a problem with the cameras of that time where they captured the image in reverse. And often, to compensate for that, they attempted to change their uniform accoutrements so that they could approximate what the image actually looks like if you're seeing it. And when I talk about this image in Civil War photography talks, I really focus in on the oval US buckle that he's wearing. And you can see here that the U and the S is upside down. Now, this is not a negative commentary on the United States military or the government. It's nothing more than this soldier's attempt to right the wrong that was part of photography at that time. So if we take a close-up look at this buckle, you're going to see that it's quite a great reproduction, the image quality reproduction, that is, and you can clearly see the upside down U and the S. Now, through the magic of Photoshop, i.e. modern technology, we can manipulate, flip that around and flip it again to be able to show what that buckle actually looks like. So this, of course, is how he saw it. This is how the camera saw it, reversed. So he flipped it upside down to get as close as he could to making the U be the first letter and the S being the second letter. So kudos to him for trying that out. And here, if we pan out a little bit more, you can see that buckle clearly in its position, the way he wanted you to see it, but not exactly the way that he ultimately wanted you to see it. And now we are back to the full frame, so you can see the complete effect of this red-bearded, long red-bearded soldier. Now, it's fair to say that tintypes, ambrotypes, and daguerreotypes is a negative, right? This is a negative image. These are one-of-a-kind images that were on plates of silver. That's the daguerreotype. tintype, which is iron, and ambrotype, which is glass. So these were one-of-a-kind images, only one existed. And this is why you have this reversal effect, this backwards effect, because it's in fact a negative of the image. Now, if you're doing the tech talk, if you're a photo historian, you don't normally say backwards, although it's perfectly acceptable, but the preferred term, the accurate term, is the image is laterally reversed. Now, when I talk about photography and give a history of Civil War photography, I usually go from this conversation about backwards images or laterally reversed images to albumin prints. And so here's an example of an albumin print. This is in the carte de visite format, which is about the size of a modern trading card. And here we have this soldier who is standing, full standing, and he's holding his musket. And if we come up, you can see his US buckle. It's a little bit blurry. He moved a little bit during the exposure time, but you can clearly see that the U is in its proper position and the S is in its proper position and they're right side up. Now, there's a reason for that, because the carte de visite and other albumin prints were in fact positive prints made from a negative. Now, keep in mind, think about the tintypes, ambrotypes, and daguerreotypes. They are a single negative plate. So you're looking at the negative, which is why it is backwards. The albumin, in this case, the carte de visite that I just showed, is a positive print made from a negative. That's why it is right side up. Well, not exactly. When I tell people that the carte de visite fixed the reversal problem, it's somewhat accurate for me to be able to say that, but not exactly accurate, because I tend to gloss over some details when I make the jump between the hard plates and the albumin prints. So in truth, photographers who created tintypes or ambrotypes or daguerreotypes, they had three options to correct this lateral reversal problem. Now, the first one is they could make a copy of the original. So this is a pretty simple concept, right? You take the photograph that you just made, or one that you made weeks ago or months ago or a couple years ago, you put it on a camera stand and you make another tintype of it, or another ambrotype, or another daguerreotype. And when you do that, when you make a photograph of a backwards photograph, you get a photograph that is the right side up. Now, you have to rule that out. And why? Is because when you make a print, or pardon me, a photograph of a photograph, you're really making a second generation photograph. And that second generation copy is not going to be as nice as the first one. So you have a quality issue when you make a photograph of a photograph. So for that reason, not really something that would appeal to photographers or the customers who consume them. So that's option one. Option two is, in the case of ambrotypes that were on glass, you could flip them around. And if you flip them around, you would see the backwards part of the negative, therefore a positive. Now, that's a good idea. And in fact, some photographers did that. However, you also can get some of the same quality issues because the emulsion that was on the front of the plate then gets reversed to the back. You lose a little bit of the visibility because you have to look through a plate of glass that has a certain thickness to it. And then the emulsion is now on the back of the glass. You might get some odd reflections coming off of the glass. So again, there's a bit of a quality issue that's connected with it. Not to say that it didn't work. In some cases it did, but it wasn't reliable enough for photographers to flip the ambrotype around routinely. Now, there's a third option, and the third option is use a secondary mirror. Exactly. What? What is a secondary mirror? Now, to get that, we have to understand how early photography worked. If we go to way back to the late 1500s, we're going to become acquainted with the camera obscura. Now, the camera obscura is critically important. This was a device used primarily by artists to point at a scene that had a fine lens, and then the reflection of the scene in front of them would be reflected onto a board that was at an angle, and that reflection would come up through glass, and lo and behold, the artist could then trace that image, which is what you see happening here. Now, the camera obscura is connected. Let's say it's connected because in some cases we don't have exact proof. But I think it's fair to say, based on research of art historians, that some names that you know, and in fact, some of my personal favorite Renaissance artists are connected in some way with the camera obscura. You know Da Vinci, Vermeer, Canaletto, Caravaggio, Ang. All of these artists had a connection, and they used the camera obscura, or believed to have used the camera obscura, to be able to get some of the details of their draftsmanship. Now, we're going to go back to the camera obscura, and we're going to flash forward from the Renaissance period to 1839. And when we come to 1839, we're going to see the invention, the discovery that rocked the world, the discovery of photography. And what I'm sharing with you now is a page from the pamphlet that was written initially by Daguerre, because he's the one who is credited with this invention. Of course, it bears his name, the daguerreotype. Here's a page from his manual. This, in fact, is the 1840 version that American photographers, or I should say, curious artists who had heard about this invention, within a month of its invention, it comes over to the United States. So here you have these individuals that knew nothing about how to make a photograph looking at this pamphlet. And on, I believe this is page 12, there's two diagrams that are really key to understanding the camera, and they're going to help us understand this concept of the secondary mirror. So here's the first figure in that 1840 pamphlet. Daguerre, it's simply labeled as figure 14, and you can read all the details in here as Daguerre describes what the label behind each label, or pardon me, the definition behind each letter that you see in the diagram. So I'm going to spare you all of that. And this first circle is around the lens. The second circle is around the plate for the photograph. And so here what you really have is Daguerre taking a camera obscura, that device that the fine artists used for a few hundred years, and turning it into, or modifying it is perhaps the better term, modifying it into a camera. So there's a bit of a glimpse at that. So if we slide down the page and go to figure 15, we're now looking at a top view of the camera. And so imagine this box, we're looking down on it now, and I've put a circle around the lens so you can orient yourself. Below is the place where the plate goes, and the idea is simple. You open up the lens cap, the light filters in, it makes the negative, it develops the negative, or sensitizes the negative. Now, What's really important to this conversation are the letters J and K. I'm going to circle them here for you. J and K is surrounding this secondary mirror. And the secondary mirror is the way that you could make the image right side or undo the lateral reversal process. And not only do we have this pictured in Daguerre's original camera, but we actually have text that describes it. And here is what it says. This instrument, and we're talking about the camera, this instrument has the disadvantage of reversing the objects. This can indeed be easily obviated by substituting another mirror as KJ figure 15. This arrangement, however, Daguerre goes on to say, injures the effect on the photographic plate from the loss of light. So what Daguerre is saying is the introduction of that mirror reduces the light that's coming in, and that is going to have a negative impact on that silver plate that is going to be sensitized by the action of the light on the chemicals. Daguerre goes on to say, it is therefore not to be employed unless when the operator has time to spare. It increases the time of the operation by 1/3 of the whole. So if you're sitting for your photograph and it's going to take 15 seconds, you're going to sit another 5 seconds. That's a lot of time and it can become problematic. So use of the secondary mirror as a third option is also not the best choice. So although there were options available to photographers of the time period, they didn't take advantage of them. So that leads to a question. Why didn't inventors perfect that secondary mirror? Or maybe another way to ask this question is, why didn't they come up with another better way to be able to correct this problem? So you have to really appreciate this from the standpoint that photographers and inventors of this time period, they're technologists as much as they are artists, chemists, scientists, inventors. They're really technologists that are out there on the front lines of coming up with creative ways to be able to make things better. So you have to ask the question, these inventors, these photographers are a creative bunch. They're dreamers, they're technologists. They're highly adaptable. Why didn't they just figure it out? Why didn't they come up with a way to fix that secondary mirror or come up with some other invention to be able to correct this problem? So here's what I think is going on here. There really wasn't a business case for it. There was no need. And why? Because customers, i.e., the folks who came into the galleries and sat for their portrait, they accepted the lateral reversal as part of life and part of something that was absolutely natural to them. And you may think, well, why exactly is that? How is it possible that it was natural to them? Well, you have to think about the idea that that's all they saw in their lives. They looked into mirrors. They didn't have all the technology we have today. So in fact, lateral reversal, it's a 21st century problem. It's something that when we look at a photograph from the 19th century, we may be affected by it. But folks in the 1840s and the 1850s and the early 1860s, it wasn't a problem. They just accepted it as part of who they were and part of what the camera was all about. So again, very fair to say, people of the 19th century, they saw themselves in a mirror. And that was a shared experience that went on for centuries, all the way back through time, all the way back through the camera obscura and other inventions. So a great image to illustrate that, this carte de visite of a young girl standing in front of the mirror. How important were mirrors, looking glasses, to be able to see yourself during that time period? Now, I want to give you a quote here that I think helps describe what I'm talking about here. This appeared in a publication called the Art Journal in the winter 1976-1977 issue. The author is Donald D. Keyes, and here's what he has to say. The fact that the most popular sizes, and now he's talking about the different plate sizes of tintypes and ambrotypes and daguerreotypes, were 6th or 9th plates. For those of you who are collectors, you know that these are smaller plate sizes, fractions of a larger plate. Now, the fact that most popular sizes were 6th or 9th plates meant that the images were easily carried on one's person and comfortably fitted into the hand. So you're holding a 9th plate or a 6th plate, it's in your hand. You can put it into your vest pocket. You can put it into the pocket of your dress. These are the personal objects that you could have with you. Keyes goes on to say, hence, the personal touch was important. The personal touch of these images. The lateral reversal, here he goes, the backwardsness of them. The lateral reversal of the picture meant that the image was familiar only to the sitter. That is, his mirror image as seen by him and only him or her. That's pretty powerful stuff. This really, if you're a collector and you look at these images and you look at the men and women pictured, and then you think about this quote, how important it was to hold those images in your hand, to keep them near you in the pocket of a vest or a coat or a dress, and then to understand that the familiar nature of that image, the reversal, the in the mirror vision was personal only to you or to someone that was close to you. It makes the image even more important. So that's not a 19th century problem. That, in fact, is a 19th century joy. This idea of the lateral reversal or the backwards quality is something to be embraced. It's something to be celebrated. Now, I want to go back to the albumin prints. And as I spoke about earlier, the albumin print is a positive print made from a negative, therefore removing the reversal problem. So there's now 2 ways to look at this. You can see this image here. This is a positive print from a negative in the carte de visite format of a soldier at Benton Barracks in St. Louis, Missouri. We're looking at him not as he saw himself in a mirror, but we're looking at him as we would see anyone in a 21st century image. And we know this because of the way his coat buttons. We know this because of his US buckle is clearly right side up, so we can see it. And so this presents a new question: is the development of albumin prints, which really came into vogue around the time of the Civil War. It begins to change not only the way that folks saw themselves, but that very personal nature of those handheld tintypes and ambrotypes. We're now seeing you, your loved one, your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, in the unreversed, a normal position. So if you're a Civil War soldier, this was perhaps more of an advantage to you. And I'll take you back to the red bearded soldier that I showed at the beginning of this presentation. That red bearded soldier was struggling to get his US buckle right side up so we could see that U first. Now, with the birth of the Albumin Prints and the carte visite, this soldier did not have to go through that. And so there's a big change that happens during the Civil War with technology, thanks to the Albumin Prints. Now, whether or not that was a good thing culturally, I suspect it was, because ultimately albumins and carte visites come to be the dominant photographic format by 1865, replacing the ambrotype and the tintype and the daguerreotype, which had dominated during the 1850s into the early 60s. So that's the end of this presentation. I want to thank you for listening. And I want to remind you that this broadcast, this video, is coming to you from Military Images magazine. We've been around since 1979, covering Civil War photography, Civil War portrait photography, telling the soldier stories, sharing information about various technologies. And I thank everyone tonight that's watching who's a subscriber. If you're not a subscriber, go to shopmilitaryimages.com and check out our subscriptions, or go to militaryimagesmagazine.com to learn more, and you can find your way from there. So thank you so very much. I wish all of you a great evening, and thank you for tuning in.